The sound came first, a dull crack of body against asphalt, and then the silence that follows violence. He was face down before the camera caught up. One officer shouted something blurred by wind. Another tightened his grip. And then, from the far side of the parking lot, 10 men in dark suits appeared, walking fast, weapons holstered but hands ready. For a heartbeat, even the air froze. The mall's afternoon hum fractured. Car alarms hiccuped awake. A woman's voice gasped off screen, and then nothing. Every sound folded into itself, the way sound does when the world realizes it's being watched. The boy didn't move. His cheek pressed to the oil-stained ground, fingers splayed like he was still mid-sprint. A bright red wristband, cheap plastic torn at one edge, caught the sunlight. It was the only color that refused to dull. An officer's boot hovered, then steadied. Another's radio crackled. "Control, we've got—" Then static. The agents kept coming. 10 of them. Their steps even. The kind of synchronization that came from years of training. Their coats shifted in the wind, black against the silvered cars, black against the boy's stillness. Someone whispered, "FBI," not with relief, but like an omen. The recording device trembled. The image blurred and sharpened again, the way truth does when it meets panic, and then everything held. The agents stopped 6 feet away. The officers froze mid-motion. For the first time in that entire 12-second clip, no one moved. By evening, the video was everywhere. 12 seconds of American clarity, looped, dissected, slowed. Argued news anchors leaned forward over glossy desks, repeating phrases like disturbing footage, incomplete context, and under review. Every screen carried the same light, the washed-out sun, the asphalt glare, the same small sound at that crack, repeated until it lost its meaning. In the clip, one could almost miss the wind lifting the hem of the boy's shirt, or the thin silver chain slipping from his collar. The world missed small things when it was too busy defining big ones. By midnight, the parking lot was empty again. The mall's lights hummed overhead, their industrial whiteness indifferent to what had happened below. A janitorial truck passed, spraying water across the concrete. The mist caught the streetlight, briefly forming a halo above the scene, wholly accidental, gone. The police tape was already down. The asphalt gleamed, newly washed. Only a faint, darker patch remained, roughly human-shaped, slowly drying in the night air. Inside the mall, cleaning crews wiped fingerprints from glass doors, vacuumed the carpet by the food court, and returned the world to order. A manager updated the incident log. "Minor disturbance," he typed. "No damage to property." On a laptop screen in a newsroom across the city, the video played on loop. The editor watched without blinking. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He slowed the footage, frame by frame. The boy's face came into focus, young, terrified, still trying to understand what mistake his body had made. The editor paused on the 10th second. The moment the FBI agents appeared, he leaned closer. "You see that?" he said to no one. In the reflection of the screen, he saw his own eyes widen. He pressed play again. The agent stopped. The officers froze. The boy remained on the ground. And the video ended, abrupt, merciless. He played it again. And again. Until repetition dulled the horror into analysis. On social media, the footage evolved. Some posted it with music, others with hashtags. Comment sections filled with arguments masquerading as certainty. One comment read, "He shouldn't have run." Another, "They didn't even draw guns. Why make it racial?" Then another, "Look at the body language." They knew they were being filmed, each line added to the noise, a national chorus rehearsing its denial. Meanwhile, in a quiet living room, a mother sat on the edge of her couch, the glow of the phone reflected in her eyes. She had watched the clip 43 times, on mute. Each time she counted the seconds, the rhythm of grief she couldn't yet name. When the agents appeared, her lips parted, as if to say his name, but she didn't. She knew names became headlines too easily. Her hand hovered above the phone, then lowered. Silence filled the room, heavy as a verdict. At 2:17 a.m., the FBI field office lights burned cold white. A projector displayed the same 12 seconds against a blank wall. The agents sat in a perfect row, their faces impassive, their reflections doubling in the polished table surface. The playback stopped at the moment of arrival, when they had entered the frame. Their supervisor, A woman with clipped grey hair and an expression carved from policy said only, "We'll cooperate with review." Then she added, "No personal statements." Pens clicked. Notes were taken. Silence followed. Professional, practiced silence. On the screen, the boy's stillness lingered. The agents looked away first. By morning, a press release circulated. An internal investigation is underway. The Bureau takes all use of force incidents seriously. We ask the public to withhold judgment until the facts are known. The statement used 23 lines to say nothing. But the image, that single frozen frame, had already told the story. Outside, the sun rose pale over the mall's rooftops. Delivery trucks reversed into loading bays. Doors opened, lights flicked on. The world resumed. But in the corner of the lot where the boy had fallen, a shimmer of dried water marked the spot. For a moment, the early light caught it, a thin mirror on the ground. It reflected nothing clearly, only movement, only shapes, the kind of reflection that asks more than it answers, the kind that never stops playing. Detective Mara Ellison arrived before the mall opened, before the air filled with perfume and the low hum of commerce. The parking lot was still damp from an early rinse, the asphalt darkened to the color of gunmetal. The morning sun rose slow and white, reflecting in hundreds of windshields like identical small truths. She parked far from the entrance, out of habit, and sat for a moment inside the idling car. The hum of the engine steadied her pulse. In the side mirror, she could see the faint yellow tape still coiled at the edge of the pavement, fluttering in the wind like a discarded warning. She turned off the ignition. Silence returned, sterile and complete. The main doors to the mall were glass, immaculate, automatic and self-sufficient. They parted at her approach, whispering open as if to acknowledge authority. Inside, the light changed, fluorescent, unmerciful without shadow. The concourse stretched ahead, polished floor tiles, rows of shutters still down, and the faint antiseptic scent of a place perpetually cleaned but never purified. Every surface reflected something. Ceiling lights mirrored in marble, her own figure refracted in the chrome of a closed boutique gate. Each reflection seemed slightly delayed, as though the building itself was reluctant to return her gaze. Mara's shoes made soft, rhythmic sounds, professional, deliberate. She noted the acoustics, the way the walls swallowed sound, how even movement here felt supervised. The architecture was built for control. Not violence, not chaos, but containment. The security office was located behind an unmarked door near the food court. Inside, the shift captain, a man with thinning hair and a precise tie knot, stood waiting beside a bank of monitors. Each screen showed a fragment of yesterday. Cars arriving, people running, then the aftermath. Mara didn't sit. "Play it," the captain hesitated. "You've probably already seen—" "Not this feed," she interrupted. He pressed a button. The screens flickered, synchronized, and the same 12 seconds unfolded from multiple angles, a kaleidoscope of procedure and panic. The boy running. The officers closing in. The agents emerging, each from a different lens. From this view, the mall's glass facade appeared behind them, gleaming under late sunlight. In the reflection of that glass, the whole event replayed a second time, reversed, silent, spectral. Mara watched until the frame froze on the moment of convergence. 10 agents, 2 officers, 1 boy, 1 nation's conscience. She said, "Pause there." The image held. On the monitor's surface, her own reflection overlapped the scene. She stood almost at the same scale as the agents, ghosting them. "How many cameras cover that section?" she asked. 12, the captain said. 7 outdoor, 5 interior. We've pulled all relevant feeds. Relevant. He swallowed. Those showing direct contact. Pull everything, she said. Before and after. Movement, crowd flow, even parking entries. No gaps. He nodded, uneasy. She studied him. His badge gleamed under the sterile light, the reflection hitting her eyes like accusation. In the hallway outside, maintenance staff were rolling carts of cleaning supplies. A woman in a pale uniform paused to let Mara pass. The mop bucket sloshed quietly as it moved. Water dark, used, reflective. Mara thought of the asphalt outside, of how quickly a stain could be erased if you knew the right solvent. At 9:42 a.m., she met the mall's general manager, a man whose tone was perpetually apologetic, but whose eyes measured liability. "We take incidents like this very seriously," he said, hands folded on the conference table. The table was glass. Beneath it, their mirrored legs appeared stiller than their real ones. "I'm sure you do," Mara replied. He continued, "Our security followed standard protocol. We've cooperated with the Bureau's internal review and—" "I'm not Bureau," she said evenly. "I'm Internal Affairs, Municipal Oversight." The manager blinked. "Of course." The silence that followed was tight and corporate, the kind that demanded endurance rather than comfort. She leaned back, observing him. Behind his head, the wall bore a large photo of the mall's grand opening, ribbon cutting, smiling officials, a promise of prosperity sealed under fluorescent light. Every empire, she thought, begins with glass. After the meeting, she walked the perimeter. The food court smelled faintly of bleach and sugar. Workers unstacked chairs, adjusting them into perfect alignment. Mara paused at the entrance to a boutique, the display window spotless, the mannequins rigid under spotlights. Their stillness reminded her of something she couldn't name. In the reflection of that glass, she saw herself again, posture erect, face unreadable. A woman of the system, investigating the system, within a structure designed to perpetuate the system. A hall of mirrors. She took notes by hand, the motion sharp. Efficient. 12:47. Officers on scene pre-FBI arrival 12:49. Unknown trigger. Pursuit? Report? 12:52. Subject down. Agents arrive. Duration. 12 seconds recorded. 38 unaccounted for. She paused at the last line. Unaccounted for. Always the most important part of any report. Her pen hovered, then underlined it once. At noon, she exited the building through the west doors. Sunlight struck her like interrogation. The parking lot shimmered again, flat, merciless, endless. The spot where the boy fell was almost invisible now, except for the faint discoloration on the pavement. A child nearby dropped a soda can. The metallic sound echoed, the same pitch, the same hollow metallic tone as yesterday's impact. Mara's shoulders tightened involuntarily. She looked toward the lot's edge, where 10 silhouettes had once converged, and for a moment imagined them still standing there, motionless, statues carved in the posture of authority. Then the vision broke. Only cars, only heat. She took a slow breath and reached for her badge. The metal was warm from her palm. For a brief, uneasy moment, she felt the weight of it differently, as both shield and burden. Behind her, the mall's glass facade caught the sun, sending back a fractured reflection of the lot. From a distance, it looked almost beautiful. Up close, the reflections split. 10, 20, 100 versions of the same moment, all trapped in polished surfaces. The building gleamed, indifferent. The system reflected in itself. Mara turned toward her car, her reflection fragmenting across each window she passed. Every pane of glass returned her image slightly distorted, taller, thinner, ghosted at the edges. By the time she reached the door and looked back one last time, the mall had swallowed its own history whole. Only the light remained, fluorescent, polished, procedural. She started the engine. The hum filled the silence again, steady, official. But in the side mirror, the concrete shimmered, and for an instant, only an instant, it looked like water. Something fragile, something that remembered what it had seen. Then the reflection broke and the world resumed its order. The room was small, square, and colorless. Grey walls, one metal table, 2 plastic chairs, the kind of space designed not for comfort but compliance. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. The scent of bureaucracy left too long in still air. Kaden Moore sat in the nearer chair, wrists resting on the table, palms open, eyes lowered. His left wrist carried a faint red bruise in the shape of a handprint, uneven, fresh, too deliberate to be mistaken for accident. Across from him, the public defender shuffled papers, each rustle echoing like accusation. The ceiling light buzzed. The clock on the wall ticked in steady defiance of silence. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" the defender asked. Kaden didn't respond. The man waited, patient but uneasy. His suit looked too large, sleeves brushing the table's edge. "You have the right to remain silent," he said carefully, as if reciting for the record. "But silence can be—" "I know," Kaden said quietly. The voice startled both of them, low even, precise. The lawyer hesitated. "You do?" Kaden nodded once, not looking up. His thumb rubbed at the bruise on his wrist. Tracing it like a memory, the clock continued. One tick for every second the boy refused to elaborate. From the hallway outside came the faint sound of a copier starting, then stopping. Kaden's head lifted slightly at the noise, then lowered again. The fluorescent light above flickered once, briefly dimming the color of his skin, then returning it, an artificial heartbeat. The defender tried again. The footage is everywhere. Everyone's seen it. The question is, what happened before the video started? Kaden stared at the table. The plastic was scratched, the pattern of previous interviews engraved into its surface. Initials, dates, pressure marks from pens pressed too hard. He traced one with his finger. A looping curve that might have been someone's name once. He said, "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter." Silence again. It filled the space like gas, invisible but suffocating. The defender cleared his throat, reached for his pen and clicked it. Once, twice. Each sound bounced off the walls, then vanished. Finally he sighed. "Listen, Kaden, they'll spin this if we don't get ahead of it. The Bureau's already saying the agents were there for something else. You were, what, just in the wrong place?" Kaden's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. "They'll build a story around that silence," the defender continued, trying to sound firm. "A story where you look like a threat. You have to understand how this works." "I do," Kaden said again, still quiet, still calm. He lifted his head now, finally meeting the man's eyes. His gaze was steady, not defiant, not pleading, just present. "It's always a story," he said. "And I don't get to write it." The defender leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Kid, you're not helping yourself." Kaden smiled faintly. Not amusement, more resignation. "Maybe not. But at least I'm not helping them." The words hung in the air, precise and heavy. From somewhere in the hall came the muffled click of footsteps, measured. Official passing by the door, then fading. The lawyer set down his pen. "Okay, let's just talk off record for a second." Kaden didn't answer. "I watched the video," the man said. "I saw the agents, the officers, all of it. But what I keep thinking about, what everyone keeps asking, is why you stopped running." The boy blinked slowly, as if the question itself was foreign. "I didn't stop," he said finally. "They stopped me." It wasn't anger in his tone, it was fact. The simplicity made it sharper than accusation. The lawyer looked at him for a long time. Then he stood and crossed to the wall, pressing a button near the clock. The camera above the door clicked off, the red light fading. "We're clear now," he said. "No recording. You can talk freely." Kaden's expression didn't change. After a moment, he said, "That's what they told me before they hit record." "Too." The defender froze, hand still resting on the wall. He turned slowly back to the table, sat down again. "You don't trust me," Kaden shrugged. "You're part of it." Minutes passed without words. The sound of the clock became unbearable, too precise, too relentless. Tick, tick, tick. Each one another second inside the system. The lawyer eventually gathered his papers, aligning them neatly. "We'll need to schedule another meeting," he said softly. "I'll request your release to your mother's custody pending review." Kaden nodded once. When the man stood to leave, the chair's legs squealed across the floor, the loudest sound in the room so far. It broke the silence like glass. At the doorway, he hesitated. "You're a brave kid," he said quietly. Kaden didn't respond. The door closed. He was alone again. The hum of the ceiling light filled the room's edges. On the table, the reflection of the bulb shimmered, circular, unsteady, like a halo that couldn't decide whether to stay. He lifted his wrist and examined the bruise. The redness had faded slightly, but the shape remained, 5 lines, perfect symmetry, a record of pressure. He pressed his thumb over it until the pain returned. It grounded him. Outside the narrow window, afternoon light bled pale against the frosted glass. The world beyond was visible only as motion, silhouettes crossing, indistinct. Kaden watched them for a long time. Each blurred figure might have been anyone, officer, lawyer, janitor, witness, and it didn't matter. All of them moved the same way. Straight lines, quick steps, purpose rehearsed. He wondered if any of them could hear the clock. He wondered if silence sounded different on the other side of the door. When the light in the room began to dim, a soft mechanical whir replaced it. Evening cycle, automatic. The clock continued, unwavering. Kaden closed his eyes and let the rhythm settle into him. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound marked survival. Each silence marked refusal. He thought about words, how they were used against him, around him, above him. How silence was the only thing they couldn't edit. He opened his eyes again, and in the reflection of the table's dull plastic surface, saw the faint outline of his own face stretched and distorted. He spoke once, barely a whisper, not to anyone present. "I'm still here," the clock answered, one more tick. In the hallway, unseen, Detective Mara Ellison paused outside the door. She listened, not for words, but for what filled their absence. A boy's silence, thick as protest. A clock counting down to consequence. She noted the sound. She would write it later in her report as subject uncooperative, but in that moment she understood what the report could not. Silence, when sustained long enough, begins to sound like truth. Rewind. The moment before the world froze was not chaos. It was choreography. 10 agents moved through the parking lot in practiced rhythm, black suits, dark ties, earpieces glinting under late light. Their steps fell in sequence, measured by habit more than command. Each man carried the same posture, shoulders squared, jaw set, gaze level. From a distance they looked identical. Up close intention fractured them. One came to protect, one to contain, one to control. The rest followed protocol. The Bureau's vehicles had stopped precisely 30 yards from the mall's western entrance, where the boy was already down. No sirens, no shouted orders, just the quiet efficiency of arrival. The agents fanned outward in a loose arc, forming what the media later called the circle. It was not a formation born of conscience. It was habit, a geometry of dominance disguised as procedure. Their footsteps synchronized on the asphalt, 10 strikes, each perfectly timed. The sound was almost ceremonial. Agent Daniel Pierce led the line. He was 46, 20 years in, known for restraint and precision. His badge hung at his hip, its metal face flashing once with sunlight, a flicker mistaken by the cameras for resolve. He raised his hand slightly, a motion of caution. The others froze, mirroring him. Around them, the crowd's murmurs receded, pulled into the undertow of tension. In those few seconds, authority was not spoken. It was arranged. Behind Pierce, Agent Malik Rivera adjusted his stance, eyes scanning the boy's motionless form. He noticed the bruise blooming along the neck, the angle of one arm bent wrong. He wanted to move forward, to check for pulse, to intervene, but Pierce's still hand held him in place. Protocol over impulse, always. Pierce's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Hold." The word carried across the line like current. No one questioned. No one asked why. On the far left, Agent Sarah Vaughan's hand hovered near her weapon, not out of fear but reflex. She'd been briefed on a separate operation nearby. This, she thought, wasn't supposed to be theirs, yet there they were. 10 federal agents staring at a child pressed against concrete, while mall security held their distance. She glanced sideways. The men beside her were statues. Their silence looked like control, but it felt like paralysis. She spoke once, barely audible. "He's a kid." Pierce didn't look at her. "Not our jurisdiction yet." The yet landed like a verdict. Every badge on their belts caught the same shaft of sunlight, the same glint that turned their stillness into spectacle. From the camera's perspective, it looked like unity. 10 agents standing firm, unflinching, coordinated. From inside the circle, it felt like dissonance, a dozen small instincts crushed beneath a single word. Protocol. The air thickened. The boy's breathing was audible now, short, uneven. One of the officers who had tackled him muttered something defensive. He ran. Another nodded, avoiding eye contact. Pierce said nothing. Silence in these situations was safer than empathy. Agent Rivera finally stepped forward. "1 minute," he said quietly. "Let me check him." Pierce hesitated, not from cruelty but calculation. The cameras were already rolling. The Bureau's presence would be interpreted as authority. Every move now would belong to the record. "Wait," Pierce said. "Document first." He gestured to the tech officer behind them, who raised a small device, capturing angles, timestamps, distances. The boy remained still. The footage, later slowed and analyzed frame by frame, would show Rivera's jaw tightening, his hand curling into a fist. The impulse to act, aborted by procedure. It was Vaughan who broke formation first. A step forward, half a step really. Barely movement. But the change of distance shifted everything. The line's geometry broke. Pierce turned to her, eyes sharp. "Agent," she froze. "Sir," Back in line, she obeyed. But her gaze lingered on the boy's wrist, the faint bruise, the slow rise and fall of his chest. She would remember that rhythm later in dreams, where silence sounded like guilt. Around them, onlookers gathered. Phones rose. The sound of digital recording filled the space, the soft static of observation. For every camera pointed at the boy, there were 3 aimed at the agents. Pierce knew what the public wanted, a posture of order. He gave it to them. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, stopping at the boy's side. "Subject is breathing," he said for the record. His voice was level, detached, administrative. He did not touch the boy. He simply looked down, not at the body but at the situation. When the ambulance arrived, the agents stepped back in perfect sync. Their silence, broadcast live, was interpreted as solemnity. Viewers saw control. What they didn't see was the fracture beneath it. 10 intentions grinding against one another beneath the weight of uniform stillness. Protocol was the only thing holding them together. Protocol and the knowledge that history had already begun recording. Later, in debrief, Pierce wrote his summary with clinical precision. Arrived on site 12:52. Observed physical altercation between subject and local officers. Formed containment perimeter. Ensured scene safety pending medical arrival. Actions consistent with Bureau protocol. He signed it without pause. Each word neutral, antiseptic. A statement purified of conscience. Rivera didn't write his report that night. He sat in his car instead, engine off, badge on the dashboard catching faint orange light. He replayed the moment, the way the boy's eyes opened once, unfocused, and met his. No sound. Just that look. He thought of how silence could wound more than words. Vaughn filed hers at midnight. She omitted one detail. The half-step forward, the thought that had moved her body before training pulled it back. She replaced it with a single phrase, maintained position. That, she realized, was the Bureau's creed. Maintain position, even when the ground burns beneath you. In the official footage, the 10 agents stand like sentinels, their shadows converging around the fallen boy. Freeze frame. That image would circle the world. A tableau of authority mistaken for unity. Control mistaken for care. The public saw a wall of order. But within the circle, each agent heard a different sound. The echo of their own hesitation. When the camera pulled back, when the footage became evidence, the choreography solidified into myth. The Bureau released a statement the next morning. All actions taken were consistent with established protocol. The word protocol appeared 7 times in the 2-paragraph release. It gleamed like the badges in the sunlight, polished, untouchable, blinding. In every system, there is a moment when duty becomes disguise. For the agents, that moment came when silence replaced conscience. When the circle closed not to protect but to preserve. And from above, through the mall's mirrored glass, through the lens of every camera, the pattern looked perfect. 10 agents, 1 boy, a flawless geometry of order, until someone looked closer and saw what the silence was hiding. The footage begins at 12 seconds, but stories always begin before the record starts. Outside the mall, the crowd had already formed, drawn not by justice, not by curiosity, but by the gravity of spectacle. 100 faces, half reflected in glass storefronts, half lit by the pale glow of cell phone screens. Each held their own version of the truth, already rehearsed before anyone asked. "Yeah, I saw the whole thing," a man in a grey hoodie said. He was running fast, looked guilty. 2 feet away, a woman holding a stroller shook her head. He wasn't running from anyone. They were chasing him before he even looked back. Their voices overlapped, competing with the crackle of mall security radios. "Unit 4, confirm perimeters." 10-9, repeat transmission. The language of order hummed over the noise of interpretation. The journalist moved carefully through the group, her recorder angled down, red light blinking. She asked the same question each time, soft, neutral, practiced. "What did you see?" Every answer began the same way. I think he pushed someone. I think they said he stole something. I think the agents came from inside the mall. Each I think was a small confession, a hand raised in the courtroom of perception. A teenager, filming on his phone, replayed his clip for the journalist. The image shook, blurry at first, until it stabilized on the moment of the tackle. "You can see it right there," he said. "They didn't warn him." In the reflection of the phone's screen, the journalist saw her own face layered over the boy's, her outline ghosting the scene. For a second, it looked like she was there too, standing in judgment. She lowered the phone, her voice steady. "Do you remember what you heard before that?" He frowned. "Just people shouting." "Who?" "I don't know, everyone." Across the lot, a man in a pressed shirt held a half-empty coffee cup, gesturing as he spoke. The FBI came in calm, professional. You could feel the difference. They brought control to the scene. Nearby, another woman interrupted. "Control?" They stood there. They didn't even help him. He turned toward her, incredulous. "You think chaos helps?" They followed protocol. That word again, protocol. A word polished by use until its edges no longer cut. The journalist noted it down, her pen scratching quick lines on a damp page. Her handwriting leaned forward, urgent, almost impatient, as if racing against distortion. The mall's reflective windows threw the scene back at itself, a doubled crowd, multiplied panic. For every witness outside, another ghosted version appeared in the glass, equally sure, equally mistaken. 2 security guards stood near the entrance, radios murmuring at their belts. One sipped coffee. The other stared at the asphalt as if reading something written there. "They'll want statements," the first said. "Yeah," the other muttered, "but not the whole truth. Just enough to look thorough." Their voices were low, nearly lost under the noise of the crowd, the collective hum of disbelief seeking coherence. By noon, the journalists outnumbered the witnesses. Microphones replaced questions with conclusions. Local officers under investigation. Federal response raises new questions. Community divided after mall incident. Headlines were written before interviews finished. The journalist, her name was Lena Cho, watched it happen from the curb. She was not the first to arrive, but she would stay the longest. She believed still in something called accuracy. She replayed the footage on her tablet, pausing at the frame where the agents appeared, 10 silhouettes synchronizing mid-stride. Around her, the crowd began to disperse, their roles concluded. Each person left with a version of the story that confirmed what they'd already known before the moment began. Lena approached a young woman leaning against a column, arms crossed. She hadn't spoken yet, hadn't lifted her phone once. "You were close?" Lena asked. The woman nodded. "Close enough. What did you see?" A pause. "Then I saw everyone stop." Lena frowned. "Stop?" "Yeah." The woman's voice was calm, almost detached. When the agents came, even the air stopped, like the world was waiting to see which version would win. Lena wrote that down verbatim. She underlined the word version. Inside the mall, through the revolving doors, the sound of normalcy had already returned. Music from store speakers, the rhythmic clatter of cleaning carts. The institution of commerce had resumed without hesitation. Outside, the aftermath was still unfolding in human voices, all claiming proximity to truth. But each testimony seemed to slide slightly sideways, never aligning with the others. Bias doesn't scream. It whispers, rearranges memory until guilt looks like motion and authority looks like clarity. One man swore the boy had a weapon. Another swore he saw empty hands. A woman said the agents shouted warnings. A teenager said they said nothing at all. 10 witnesses, 10 realities. And in every version, the boy became a different symbol. Lena stood amid them, her pen still. She realized what she was documenting was not an event, but its translation. The truth had already been edited, first by the lens, then by language, now by recollection. She looked up at the mirrored windows again. Her own reflection stared back, fractured by glare. At 2:15 p.m., mall security began clearing the lot. Radios buzzed, yellow tape came down, order reasserted itself. One guard walked past Lena, muttering into his radio, "Scene clear. Media dispersing." She looked around. The crowd had thinned to a few lingerers, people who had seen too much or too little. The asphalt glared, featureless again. In its surface, the reflection of the sky trembled, pale and blank like a wiped screen. Lena clicked off her recorder. The red light vanished. For a moment, there was no sound except the faint drip of a leaking gutter and the shuffle of footsteps heading home. She turned her notebook to a fresh page and wrote one line across the top. The system absorbs chaos and calls it clarity. Then she closed it, placed it against her chest and exhaled slowly. Behind her, in the glass of the mall's facade, the crowd still existed, preserved in reflection, mid-motion, mid-belief. 1,000 tiny screens raised towards something larger than truth, a performance of witness. History, Lena thought, begins this way, not with facts, but with people watching facts happen. And in the reflection of their lenses, the story rewrites itself frame by frame, until nothing remains of what truly was, only what was seen. Only what could be said. The conference room had no windows. Light came from recessed fixtures set into the ceiling, pale, unwavering, and without warmth. The air conditioning murmured softly through an unseen vent, keeping the temperature constant, as if emotion itself had been regulated out of the space. On the center of the table sat a small black recorder, its red light blinking once every 3 seconds, steady, mechanical, patient. Each blink felt like an accusation. Detective Mara Ellison sat across from the first officer, pen poised, back straight. The room smelled faintly of static, that sterile scent of electronics and disinfectant. "State your name for the record," she said. "Officer Daniel Kramer." "Badge number?" 6481, she nodded, pressed the button. The red light steadied. "Now recording." "Officer Kramer," she began, her tone even, precise. "Describe your interaction with the subject prior to the use of force." He exhaled through his nose. His uniform creased perfectly at the elbows, but the hands resting on the table trembled slightly. "We received a report," he said. "A young male, black male, matching a description from a shoplifting call. We approached, identified ourselves, instructed him to stop. Did he comply?" He ran. A pause. The air vent hummed, filling the silence between his words. "Define ran," Mara said, moved quickly away from us. "Was he carrying anything?" "No, ma'am," she looked up. "Then what made you pursue?" Kramer blinked, caught in the question's stillness. "He fit the description." "Which was?" He hesitated. "Black hoodie. Black jeans, so," she said softly, "a common outfit." His jaw tightened. "He ran." The red light blinked. The hum continued. Somewhere in the corner, the clock ticked 1 second slower than the recorder's pulse, the two rhythms clashing subtly. One human, one institutional. Mara wrote a single word in her notebook, instinct, then drew a line through it. The second officer entered 20 minutes later. Officer Jacobs, younger, broader, with the eager defensiveness of a man still learning how to justify himself. He sat before she gestured, his chair squeaking against the tile. The sound cut through the room's order like a violation. "Officer Jacobs," she said, "you were the one who made physical contact with the subject." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Walk me through that moment," he swallowed. "I caught up to him by the west entrance. Told him to get down. He didn't. What did he do instead?" He froze. "Describe that." He just stopped, like he couldn't move. Eyes wide, hands out. So not resisting, he hesitated. "Not exactly." Mara leaned forward. "Not resisting at all?" His hands, folded tight on the table, whitened at the knuckles. "Ma'am, when someone freezes, that can mean fear," she said. He blinked. "Or defiance." She let the silence stretch until the air vent's hum became deafening. He continued, voice stiff. "I followed procedure. Took him down to ensure control." "Control," Mara repeated as if tasting the word. "Was he armed?" "No, ma'am." "Did you confirm that before you used force?" He didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the recorder, that small, steady pulse of red. Mara followed his look. "You can answer." "The record's impartial." He laughed once, short, bitter. "No record's impartial." For a moment their eyes met, and in that flicker the truth passed between them like static discharge. Then he leaned back, folded his hands tighter, and said, "No, ma'am, I did not confirm." Mara paused the recorder. The red light went dark. She studied him, his posture now loose, almost relieved. The moment silence returned, honesty seemed to breathe back into him. Off the record, she said, "What did you see in his face?" He looked at her, startled. "Why does that matter?" "Because you hesitated before you tackled him." His throat worked, but no words came. "What did you see?" she repeated. He rubbed his palms against his knees. He looked young, like he didn't believe it was happening. Mara nodded once, reactivated the recorder. The red light blinked again. "Repeat your statement, Officer Jacobs." He straightened, voice flat now. The subject resisted. "I used necessary force in accordance with department protocol." The hum resumed its rhythm. The institution had reclaimed him. Mara stopped writing. There was nothing left to record, only words drained of meaning, recycled through policy. The final officer, Lieutenant Gregson, entered last. He carried authority like armor, every gesture deliberate. His shoes barely made a sound on the tile. He sat, folded his hands, waited for the formality. Lieutenant Gregson, Mara said. Are you with the supervising officer on site? Yes. You arrived after the incident? Correct, so you didn't witness the use of force? No, but you filed the preliminary report. He nodded once. Based on the statements of my officers, without reviewing footage? That's procedure. Her tone sharpened. Procedure also requires verification. He met her gaze evenly. Verification isn't the same as trust. No, she said. It's the opposite. The red light blinked again, one heartbeat of recorded dissent. Gregson leaned forward, lowering his voice as if confiding something. Detective, I know how this looks, but out there hesitation costs lives. You second-guess an order, someone doesn't go home. Mara's expression didn't change. Someone didn't go home, Lieutenant. He exhaled long and slow. That's not on us. It's on who, then? He didn't answer. The hum filled the gap where conscience should have been. After the interviews, the room stayed the same temperature. The same hum, the same blink, the same absence of air. Mara gathered her notes into a neat stack, aligning the pages with deliberate precision, a ritual of order in a place built to erase difference. She turned off the recorder. The red light faded, leaving a small reflection in the polished table, a dull scar of light. In its reflection, for an instant, she saw the outline of the officer's folded hands, repeated, ghosted, infinite, a loop of obedience. She sat there a moment longer, listening to the silence. Outside the closed door, someone's footsteps passed, firm, unhurried, official. The system moving on. Mara looked up at the vent, its hum constant and cold. It reminded her of the boy's breath in the holding room. Measured, restrained, human. The air in here was too clean, too pure to hold truth. Before leaving, she pressed record again and spoke once, quietly, into the empty room. For the record, silence, too, is a statement. Then she stopped the tape, stood and walked out. The red light blinked one final time before dying, leaving the room perfectly neutral once more, grey, temperature controlled, loyal only to protocol. Althea Moore walked through the station's front doors just after sunrise. The light outside was pale, indecisive, the kind that doesn't warm, only reveals. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee, toner, and the faint metal tang of handcuffs, an institutional scent that clung to the skin long after leaving. She paused at the reception desk. Her hands rested flat on the counter, steady. No tremor, no display. I'm here for my son, she said. The officer on duty looked up, startled not by her words but by the tone, calm, deliberate, almost formal. Name? Kaden Moore. Her voice did not waver on the name. It landed like something already mourned. The officer typed slowly. The keyboard clicks echoed through the empty lobby, each keystroke a measure of indifference. Finally, he said, "You'll need to wait. Someone from Internal Affairs will meet you." Althea nodded once. "I'll wait." She took a seat along the wall, folding her hands in her lap. The chair was plastic, the color of dust. On her left wrist, a thin gold bracelet caught the fluorescent light, the only soft thing in the room. Her blouse was perfectly ironed, collar sharp, cuffs buttoned. The deliberate neatness of someone who understood that dignity in certain spaces must be armor. On the far wall, a digital clock ticked quietly, the red digits too bright, too punctual. Every second counted down to nothing in particular. A young officer passed through the lobby, carrying a paper cup of coffee. He glanced at her, then looked away quickly as if her stillness accused him. Althea sat without moving. She'd learned long ago that silence unsettles power more than outrage. Detective Mara Ellison arrived 10 minutes later. Her expression was composed, professional, but her eyes softened when she saw the woman waiting. "Mrs. Moore," she said gently. "I'm Detective Ellison. I'm handling your son's case." Althea rose slowly. "Then you're the one I need to speak with." Mara gestured toward a small interview room off the main hall. "It's quieter in here." Althea followed. The room was narrow, the same grey as all the others. A table, 2 chairs, a vent whispering cold air from the ceiling. A recorder sat waiting in the center, its red light dark for now. Althea did not sit immediately. She touched the back of the chair, testing its steadiness, before lowering herself into it. Her movements were precise, measured not by age but intention. Mara took the seat opposite. "Before we begin, would you like water, coffee?" "No, thank you." Her hands folded again, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles whitened. Mara spoke carefully. "Your son is safe. He's being held temporarily pending review. No charges filed yet." The word yet hung in the air like static. Althea nodded. "He's not a criminal." "I know." Silence followed, long enough that the hum of the vent began to sound like breath. Finally, Mara said, "Would you like to make a statement for the record?" Althea's eyes flicked to the recorder. "Whose record?" Mara hesitated. "The department's." Then no, her refusal wasn't defiance. It was precision. The word no left her lips softly but settled with the weight of a verdict. Mara tried again, quieter. "Off the record, then." Althea reached into her purse and withdrew a worn leather wallet. From inside, she slid out a small photograph. A school portrait, edges frayed from years of handling, Kaden at 12. Smiling with that slight uncertainty of children who have already learned to watch how they're seen, she placed it on the table. "This," she said, "is my statement." Mara looked at the photo. The boy's face in the image was rounder, the eyes unguarded. A different boy than the one in custody, but the same truth behind both expressions, awareness disguised as calm. Althea smoothed the corner of the picture with one finger. "He's not violent. He's not angry. He's deliberate." Her lips pressed together, as though any looser word might betray her. Mara said nothing. She understood that what was unsaid here mattered more. Althea finally looked up, her eyes sharp, unwavering. "They tackled my child like an animal." Her voice did not rise. Even accusation in her mouth came as discipline. "They will tell you it was procedure," Mara said quietly. "They always do," Althea replied. "Procedure means someone else decided what he looked like before they ever saw him." Mara's pen froze halfway across the page. The sentence entered her notepad incomplete, a line interrupted by truth. For a long moment neither woman spoke. The air vent continued its quiet hum, indifferent to the exchange. Althea leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "When he was little," she said almost to herself, "he used to freeze during storms. Wouldn't run, wouldn't hide. Just stand by the window watching the lightning. I used to tell him that kind of stillness was dangerous. He said it made him feel stronger." Her lips pressed tight again. "I guess he still believes that." Mara closed her notebook. There was nothing left to write that would not cheapen the moment. At the edge of the table, the photo lay between them, the only object with color in the grey room. Althea reached for it but paused. "Will I see him?" "Yes," Mara said. "In a few minutes. Will there be cameras?" "Probably." Althea smiled without warmth. "Then I'll keep my blouse straight." Her tone carried no vanity, only strategy. When she rose, the chair creaked faintly. The pressed fabric of her blouse caught the overhead light, reflecting it like polished armor. Mara stood too, stepping aside as Althea passed. The faint scent of starch and lavender lingered, domestic details surviving inside an institutional world. At the door, Althea stopped. "Detective." "Yes?" "Do not mistake my calm for peace," Mara nodded slowly. "I wouldn't." Althea walked down the corridor toward the holding rooms, her heels striking the tile in measured rhythm. Each step echoed back distinct, unhurried. Deliberate. The sound of dignity refusing to bend. Officers turned to look, then turned away, uncertain whether they were witnessing grief or command. In her silence, she carried both. At the far end of the hallway, a reflective window caught her image as she passed. The ironed blouse, the upright spine, the stillness that defied pity. For an instant, her reflection overlapped with her son's from the footage. Two figures suspended in the same motion. Refusal. Then the reflection fractured as she walked on, leaving only the sterile brightness of the corridor behind her. And in that light, her restraint gleamed brighter than outrage, a protest so composed it could not be silenced, only recorded. The podium stood under harsh white lights, centered before a backdrop printed with the city seal, an emblem of balance and order, of trust implied rather than earned. Rows of chairs faced forward in obedient lines. Cables snaked across the Floor-black veins feeding the microphones, the cameras, the hunger. A placard read, "Press Conference." Office of the Mayor, the seal gleamed under the fluorescence. Around it, everything else seemed slightly out of focus. Mara Ellison arrived 5 minutes early. She stood against the back wall, hands clasped, the faint smell of metal and dust in the air. From where she stood, she could see everything. The polished stage, the cluster of reporters, the subtle choreography of optics. No one spoke yet. There was only the quiet calibration of lenses, the shuffle of tripods, the clearing of throats. Silence before performance. At precisely 10 a.m., the city's communications director stepped forward, a man with 2 white teeth and a posture trained in empathy. He adjusted the microphone. "Good morning. Thank you all for coming." The feedback squealed once, then settled. Every camera blinked alive. Behind him, the mayor stood flanked by 2 police representatives and 1 federal liaison. The formation was geometric: 3 men, 1 woman, diversity curated to reassure rather than represent. Their faces were neutral, practiced. The communications director began, voice measured by metronome. "We're here to address the ongoing situation involving the recent incident outside Westbridge Mall." The word incident landed soft, as if the violence had been an inconvenience, not a boy pinned to asphalt. He continued, "The city takes matters of community trust and officer conduct with the utmost seriousness. The investigation is ongoing. We ask for patience, respect, and understanding." Each phrase came pre-assembled, smooth as marble. Mara watched the journalists take notes without expression. She could almost read the shorthand: trust, transparency, review, pending. Language stripped to procedural comfort. The mayor stepped forward next. She was tall, her suit a shade between navy and compromise. "First, I want to say to the family, our hearts are with you." The cameras clicked, capturing sympathy at 1 or 250th of a second. "This city believes in accountability," she continued, "and we will not rush to judgment until all the facts are known." Mara noted the phrasing: rush to judgment, not seek justice. It was the grammar of preservation. From the 3rd row, a reporter raised his hand. "Madam Mayor," he said, "is it true that 10 federal agents appeared on the scene within minutes? Was this a coordinated operation?" A pause. The air tightened. The mayor smiled slightly, the political kind measured to dissolve tension without yielding truth. "We are cooperating fully with all relevant agencies," she said. "The presence of federal personnel is not unusual in ongoing investigations." The microphones absorbed her words like insulation. Nothing escaped. Another reporter. "Has the teenager spoken?" The liaison from the bureau leaned forward, voice low and calm. "We cannot comment on active interviews." "And the video?" someone called. "Will it be released?" "That decision will follow standard review protocols." The repetition of protocols was deliberate, a wall built out of syllables. Behind it, human meaning suffocated quietly. Flashbulbs strobed the room. Each flash illuminated the seal, the podium, the polished shoes, the architecture of authority. Each flash also revealed what the lights tried to hide: fatigue, defensiveness, calculation. Mara watched how everyone positioned themselves, the police chief's stance slightly forward, signaling strength. The mayor's hands clasped over the podium, signaling empathy. The liaison's stillness, signaling control, none of it accidental. Everything choreographed. From the back row, a journalist, younger, unfamiliar, spoke without raising a hand. "What about the boy's silence? Doesn't that say more than any report?" The room shifted. Heads turned. Even the air seemed to hesitate. The communications director stepped in quickly. "We're not here to speculate on motivations." "But he hasn't spoken," the journalist insisted. "Not one word since the arrest." "Doesn't—" "Next question," the mayor interrupted, her voice smooth but edged. The microphones crackled, then steadied. The question vanished into the hum of coverage. In the corner, a television displayed the live feed with a 5-second delay. Mara saw the event unfolding twice, once in front of her, once on screen. The broadcast version looked cleaner. The lighting softened the shadows beneath the mayor's eyes. The sound flattened, neutralized. Reality edited in real time. She wondered which version would survive, the human one or the official. As the conference neared its end, the mayor delivered her final statement. This city is built on trust, accountability, and shared values. We must not allow division to define us. The phrase shared values landed like a closing prayer, asking for unity without consequence. Applause followed, polite, mechanical, brief. A handful of flashes captured the moment. Reporters stood, already turning toward exits, phones buzzing with headlines not yet written. When the officials left the podium, they moved as one, synchronized steps, polished restraint. Aide, mayor, chief, liaison, a procession of decorum leaving behind the echo of their own performance. Mara remained seated. The lights dimmed slightly as technicians packed equipment. The city seal on the backdrop caught the last of the glare, shimmering like something metallic unfeeling. She looked down at her notebook. In it, she had written only 4 words. Everyone rehearsed their guilt. A discarded press pass lay near her feet, folded once, its corners frayed. She bent to pick it up. The name was smudged, ink bled into paper from sweat or rain. A credential, proof of access, not understanding. She slipped it into her folder. Artifacts of the day, evidence of choreography. Outside, sunlight flooded the steps of City Hall. Reporters gathered in small knots, trading quotes and conjecture, their words thin against the wind. Somewhere across town, Kaden sat in a silent room. His silence, unlike theirs, was not performance. Mara looked back once at the building. Glass, steel, seal, a cathedral to polished truth. Inside, the microphones still stood on the podium, unattended now but recording anyway, capturing the hum of emptiness where answers should have been, and in that hum, the story of the city continued, clean, professional, and quietly complicit. The room was colder than necessary. The kind of cold that demanded compliance, that kept the body alert, the mind obedient. 1 table, 2 chairs, a faint hum of static leaking from the ceiling speaker, meant to muffle sound beyond the walls. Detective Mara Ellison sat alone at first, her notebook closed, pen aligned perfectly parallel to its spine. The recorder's red light blinked in steady rhythm, its pulse synchronized with the overhead fluorescent flicker, a mechanical heartbeat in a room built for erasure. She waited exactly 3 minutes past the scheduled time before the door opened. The head of mall security entered with an efficient gait, confident, punctual, apologetic in advance. His name badge read Ronald Wexler, the laminated card catching the light each time he moved. Beneath the plastic, the photo version of him smiled slightly wider than the one sitting down now. "Detective Ellison," he said, shaking her hand with practiced neutrality. "Appreciate you fitting me in." "Sit," she said. "This won't take long." He did as instructed, lanyard swinging, the plastic badge tapping lightly against his chest. Tick, tick, tick. Every small sound seemed amplified in the sterile quiet. "Mr. Wexler," Mara began, pressing record, "you were overseeing mall operations on the day of the incident?" "Yes, ma'am." "Regular Saturday shift. Nothing out of the ordinary until—" He hesitated just long enough for her to notice. "Until the situation unfolded." "The situation," she repeated. "You mean the assault on a minor?" He blinked. "The restraint of a suspect." She let the correction hang there, suspended between them. The red light blinked. "Walk me through what you saw." Wexler straightened, the language already lined up in his head like a manual being read aloud. "One of my officers notified me of a shoplifting alert. We followed protocol. Visual confirmation, dispatch coordination, perimeter awareness. The individual in question matched the description we were given. We observed evasive behavior." Evasive behavior. "He changed direction twice after spotting our patrol." Mara looked up. "So he walked?" Quickly, Wexler clarified, as though velocity were guilt. She noted the phrasing, visual confirmation, perimeter awareness, evasive behavior. The vocabulary of bureaucracy, verbs that removed people from their own actions. "Your security team detained him?" "We initiated a hold until police arrived." "Did they use force?" He hesitated. "Force is subjective, not when someone ends up on the ground." He shifted in his chair, the lanyard swinging again. "My officers followed standard compliance procedure." "Define standard." "Minimal force necessary to maintain safety." For whom? For all parties involved. Did the boy have a weapon? He looked annoyed now. Not that I could see. So, unarmed? Potentially? Potentially, Mara repeated. Based on what evidence? He sighed, leaning back. Detective, with respect, this wasn't some spontaneous reaction. We have systems in place. Surveillance coverage, escalation protocols, training sessions. And what do those systems teach? He frowned. To neutralize threats before they escalate. Even when the threat doesn't exist? His mouth tightened. You're twisting this. No, Mara said. I'm clarifying it. She flipped open her notebook. You mentioned surveillance coverage. Were cameras active? Yes, full perimeter feed, internal channels, external lot. Do you have that footage? It's been submitted to the Bureau. Standard chain of custody. Mara leaned back. Convenient, he smiled thinly. Transparent. The hum of static filled the pause between them. Behind Wexler, the monitor mounted on the wall glowed faintly blue, its screensaver shifting in slow, sterile gradients. Every few seconds, the faint outline of a paused frame appeared before fading again. The ghost of movement stilled mid-breath. Mara watched it. You've reviewed the footage. I have. And what did you see? He looked directly at her. A young man resisting lawful orders. She tilted her head. In the video, does he speak? No. Does he swing? Kick? Struggle? No. Then what's resisting about that? He paused. Non-compliance can take many forms, such as breathing. His lips pressed together. Detective, I think you're trying to make this personal. It already is. For a long moment, no one moved. The hum in the ceiling grew louder, a static that began to sound almost like applause, faint, endless, mechanical. Mara said softly, Tell me, Mr. Wexler, when you watched that tape, what disturbed you most? He hesitated. Disturbed? Yes, everyone feels something, even when they pretend not to. He stared at the table. Honestly? The stillness, she nodded slowly. That boy didn't fight, he said almost to himself. Didn't flinch. Just froze. Like he already knew what was coming. And you? I followed procedure. Mara turned off the recorder. The red light died, leaving them in the white noise of the room, that neutral hum that existed to erase the human residue of confession. Off the record, she said, you realize procedure doesn't absolve anything. It only distributes blame until it disappears. He looked up, startled by her tone. We don't write the rules, detective. No, she said. You enforce them until they feel inevitable. He pushed back his chair. Are we done? Almost, she pointed to his badge. Do you know why you wear that on a lanyard? He blinked. Identification. Access control. No, Mara said, because it's removable. The silence after that sentence seemed to deepen the air itself. He stood without replying, gathering his composure like a uniform. The badge swung once more as he left. The last sound before the door clicked shut. Mara remained seated. The glow of the monitor reflected faintly in the recorder's black shell. 2 screens, both blank, both complicit. She reached out and pressed record again, speaking into the emptiness. For the record, systems cannot feel guilt. Only the people hiding behind them can. She stopped the tape, slipped it into her folder and stood. As she turned to leave, the static hissed louder for a second. A burst of white noise like breath exhaled through a closed mouth. Then it was gone. The room returned to silence, as if the interrogation had never happened. Only the faint reflection of the badge remained on the table, light without warmth, authority without witness. It began as data, a 12-second clip, compressed into a file small enough to fit inside a text message. One click, then another. By midnight, it had traveled farther than truth could follow. The servers felt it first. Rows of machines in climate-controlled warehouses, blinking like constellations of appetite. Progress bars slid forward. Upload complete. Share successful. Fans whirred in rhythm, the mechanical sound of moral outrage replicating itself. A system built to sell attention was suddenly full of conviction. The clip played endlessly. A boy's body hitting asphalt. A shout, the cameras shake. 10 dark figures appearing from the far side of the parking lot. Then the freeze, that perfect stillness where no one knew what came next. Millions watched. Some slowed it down. Some looped it, cropped it, annotated it. Pause on frame 7, someone wrote. Look at the officer's knee. Pause on frame 9, another said. He's not resisting. Pause on frame 11. They knew he was a kid. Each comment carried the weight of moral certainty. Each share became a small claim to righteousness. Every replay diluted what the moment had once been. Air, noise, fear. On a trending dashboard in California, the curve spiked. You're mall justice, you Kaden more, you 10 agents. Algorithms rearranged the world into patterns of emotion. Grief, anger, irony, fatigue. A headline blinked across feeds. What really happened outside Westbridge Mall? No one asked what happened inside. In a newsroom lit by 20 screens, an intern clipped the footage again, added graphics, color correction, captions. The sound of typing filled the air, the modern hum of collective judgment. She didn't watch the video anymore. She watched the analytics panel. Engagement rates, retention curves, ad revenue per second of playback. Justice measured in impressions per hour. When the upload finished, a green checkmark appeared. Published. For a moment she stared at the bar filling to 100%. The color blue, the color of completion, the color of nothing. At 2 a.m. in another city, a man scrolled through the footage between deliveries. He watched it 3 times, then typed a comment. He should have just complied. His screen dimmed automatically, saving battery. He didn't think about it again. In a bedroom lit by a single monitor, someone paused the video at the moment Kaden's face turned toward the camera. They zoomed in pixel by pixel until the image broke apart, flesh rendered as color code. Then they turned it into a meme. Within an hour it had 200,000 likes. Somewhere else, a server farm in Ohio flickered under the weight of global attention. Technicians monitored temperature, voltage, packet flow. None of them knew the story stored inside the data they maintained. They only knew the lights could not go out. Althea saw the clip on her phone by accident, a notification she didn't open quickly enough. The thumbnail alone was enough, the blur of her son's hoodie, the glint of sunlight off a badge. She didn't watch it. Instead, she placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter and covered it with her hand as if to quiet a living thing. It kept buzzing. Every buzz was a stranger's opinion of her grief. She unplugged it, walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. The running water drowned the sound. Mara Ellison sat in her apartment, lights off, the glow of her laptop cutting through the dark. She had promised herself not to watch again. But each replay revealed a new detail, a shadow, a gesture, a flinch. She noted the timestamp when the agents entered frame. 08. The frame froze on their formation, a geometry of power. Then, unbidden, her cursor drifted to the comments. She scrolled through 1,000 declarations of certainty, each louder than the last. Everyone knew what the clip meant. No one remembered it was evidence. She closed the tab. But the silence left behind felt louder than the noise had been. The city's communications office issued a statement on social media. We are aware of a video circulating online. The incident is under investigation. We urge the public to refrain from speculation. The post gathered 42,000 replies in under an hour. Speculation was the only language the internet spoke. A parody account posted the video in reverse. Another overlaid it with a song. Someone slowed it to half speed and called it art. Each iteration blurred it further, the edges of real life dissolving into performance. By dawn, the original upload was no longer original. It existed only as copies of copies, each one a little more certain and a little less true. Inside a data center, a cooling fan clicked on. Rows of blinking lights processed outrage into electricity, stored judgment into code. Human pain became heat. Heat became waste. Waste became silence. A technician passing by noticed one server flickering faster than the rest. He logged the anomaly. Under description, he typed, excessive activity. Then he moved on. In Kaden's holding cell, the world was still. No screens. No pings, no feed. Only the quiet buzz of fluorescent light above him, the echo of his own breath in the small room. He didn't know that millions had seen him fall. He didn't know that strangers had built entire narratives around the angle of his shoulder, the tilt of his chin. He only knew that the silence inside the cell felt cleaner than the noise outside it. At 6:43 a.m., the hashtag began to decline. The servers cooled. The world moved on, but the video didn't vanish. It lived in caches, mirrors, backups, fragments of a collective certainty too profitable to delete. The progress bars froze mid-transfer, as if the system itself were pausing to breathe. For a brief, almost imperceptible second, the data stream stilled, a global freeze frame. Then everything resumed, always forward, always updating. In the city below, the first commuters stepped into morning light. Their phones buzzed again. New headlines, new outrage, new distraction. The video slipped down the feed, replaced by something else. But in the quiet corners of servers and minds, it remained. 12 seconds of evidence, endlessly repeating, endlessly unresolved. A wound rendered in pixels. A silence turned into noise. A boy forever falling, frame by frame, inside the machine. The hospital wing was silent in the way institutions are, not peace but suppression. Sound existed only in echoes, shoes against linoleum, the mechanical rhythm of an IV pump, the faint buzz of fluorescent tubes fighting to stay alive. Mara Ellison walked slowly. Her badge clipped at an angle that caught the corridor's thin light. The motion sensor lights ahead flickered on, one by one, as if announcing her presence to an invisible jury. The hallway stretched long and white, no color, no shadow, no absolution. She carried a folder, thin, neat government beige, and inside it, the system's version of the boy she was about to meet. Kaden was in room 214. The door was half open, the air inside warmer than the hall. He sat upright in bed, not restrained, not free. A grey blanket folded to his waist, a plastic cup of water untouched on the tray beside him. His right wrist bore a faint bruise, half-mooned and yellowing. His eyes followed the drip above him, drop after drop, as if watching time pass through a narrow vein. He didn't turn when Mara entered. "Good morning," she said. Her voice came out softer than intended, too human for the role. She cleared her throat, adjusted the tone. "I'm Detective Ellison. Internal Affairs." No response. She waited, hand resting lightly on the back of the visitor's chair. The folder stayed closed. Hospitals had always unnerved her. Too many forms of sanctioned pain under one roof. She had spent her career in spaces like this. Corridors that absorbed conscience, rooms that smelled of antiseptic and guilt. Kaden's silence pressed against the walls. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of refusal. She sat down. The chair's rubber legs screeched against the tile, a sound too large for the small space. He looked at her then, not with hostility, not curiosity. Just observation. Mara followed his gaze to the badge on her chest. She unclipped it, placed it face down on the table. The gesture changed nothing, but it altered the air between them. "You don't have to speak," she said quietly. "I just need to confirm your condition for the record." He blinked once, a slow acknowledgement. Her pen hovered above the form. "How would you describe your current state of health?" She wrote, "conscious, responsive, silent." The words looked like data, not humanity. Outside the window, morning light filtered through half-closed blinds. Each slat divided the sun into measured portions, control rendered in architecture. Dust hung motionless in the air, illuminated but untouched. In that suspended light, Mara saw the mirrored rhythm of two systems, his body healing in increments. Her investigation moving in reports, both processes built on containment. A nurse entered briefly to adjust the IV bag. The drip clicked, a sterile metronome. Neither Mara nor Kaden moved. When the door closed again, the room seemed to exhale. "I saw the video," she said. She hadn't planned to. The words slipped out like a confession. Kaden's gaze shifted to the window. The faint outline of the blinds reflected on his cheek. "They keep asking me to describe what happened," she continued. "But every description is a kind of distortion, isn't it?" He turned his eyes back to her. Not agreement, not challenge, only recognition. It was the closest thing to dialogue they had. Mara reached for the water cup, slid it gently toward him. He didn't move. The cup stopped halfway between them, trembling slightly from the shift. For a moment she watched the surface ripple. One small disturbance in a room built to prevent them. She realized then that her entire career had been about smoothing ripples, restoring stillness after the system faltered. But stillness, she thought, was only silence renamed. Her radio buzzed softly, a voice asking for an update, the tone clipped, procedural. She turned the volume down until it became nothing more than vibration against her coat. The folder on her lap felt heavier now, filled with names, codes, timestamps. Official truth. She wanted absurdly to set it on fire. Instead, she opened it. Inside was a single page bearing Kaden's mugshot, taken hours after the tackle. He looked the same, yet not at all, eyes half closed, jaw tense, dignity refusing collapse. She slid the page back in. Kaden spoke then, his first word since she arrived. Why? Just that Mara froze. Why what? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The question hung in the air, unassigned and endless. Why the tackle? Why the cameras? Why her badge still gleamed while his skin still bruised? There were no correct responses, only institutional ones. She gave none. A long silence followed, so long it began to sound like peace. The IV drip continued its rhythm, indifferent to moral weight. The fluorescent light above them flickered, paused, then steadied again. Mara stood. "You'll be released later today," she said. "Your mother's waiting downstairs." He nodded once. At the door she paused. The corridor stretched out before her, pale, empty, expectant. She looked back. Kaden was watching the ceiling now, eyes fixed on the slow spin of the air vent. As she stepped into the hallway, the lights hummed overhead, one flickering behind her, another ahead. Her reflection followed her in the polished floor tiles, fragmented, elongated, uncertain. The folder remained under her arm, sealed once more, as if the truth could be carried like paperwork. The sound of her footsteps faded, replaced by the steady pulse of machinery. The quiet persistence of a life still breathing within a system designed to document, not understand. Outside, morning broke fully across the city, light on glass, light on concrete, light on every surface but none beneath. Somewhere, a new story was already forming, a new headline being drafted, another name rising into circulation. But in room 214, the water cup remained untouched. Its surface still, its silence absolute. And in that stillness, something irreversible had begun. Not forgiveness, not closure, but the first tremor of moral reckoning. A drip, a pause, a flicker. The corridor hummed on, and the system, as always, pretended not to hear. The office was windowless. Air-conditioned silence pressed against the walls like insulation against conscience. Mara Ellison sat at her desk, beneath the slow pulse of fluorescent light, hands resting on the keyboard, eyes fixed on the document that would decide how the world remembered 12 seconds of brutality. The header read, Internal Affairs Division, Summary of Incident, Westbridge Mall. Beneath it, the cursor blinked, patient, indifferent, waiting for complicity to take form. She had been writing for hours, though no sentence felt like hers. Every phrase was a performance of neutrality. Subject was observed resisting lawful detainment. Agents responded in accordance with established safety protocol. Force applied was proportionate to perceived threat, each line a brick in the architecture of denial. She paused after the third paragraph, reading it back as if through glass. The language was clean, sanitized, professional. It said everything without saying anything at all. Across the room, the printer hummed softly, a machine rehearsing its own complicity. A single sheet slid out, still warm, smelling faintly of toner and heat. Mara reached for it and felt the subtle tremor of her own pulse in her. Fingertips, words, paper, procedure. Every moral failure rendered in 12-point. Font. Her superior's voice echoed from earlier that morning. Keep it objective, detective. We're not here to moralize, just to document. Objectivity, she thought, was the refuge of the comfortable, the luxury of those who never had to be the subject of a report. She scrolled down to the section marked Findings and Recommendations. The most dangerous part, the part where truth became decision. Her fingers hesitated. Recommend additional training for involved officers. She stared at the sentence, her breath catching on its cowardice. Training. As if the system's flaw could be corrected with a seminar. She deleted the line, then rewrote it, then deleted it again. The cursor blinked. It looked like a heartbeat. It looked like waiting. Mara stood pacing the narrow office. The floor tiles gleamed under fluorescent light, each reflecting a fractured version of herself. Precise, divided, reversible. On her desk sat the file from Kaden's hospital visit. The untouched cup of water came back to her mind. The stillness of it, the weight of restraint. His silence had said more than any report could. She sat again and began typing, slower now. Different words, unapproved ones. The subject's response was consistent with fear, not aggression. The tactical approach was disproportionate to the visible context. Silence, when imposed by power, cannot be considered compliance. Her pulse quickened. The sentences broke policy. They broke expectation. They felt alive, then she stopped. She knew what would happen. Revisions, redactions, clarifications. Truth smoothed into language until it lost its shape. Still, she kept typing. The system functions to protect itself. 7 words. Perfectly unprofessional. Perfectly true. The printer began again, louder this time. Pages emerged like a confession being forced into the world, each sheet stacked neatly, aligning itself as if obedience were instinct. When the final page printed, she gathered them together, tapped the edges square, and reached for the stapler. The click sounded final, the sound of a verdict disguised as routine. Her pen hovered over the signature line. Detective Mara Ellison, date, left blank. The space for her name looked accusatory, like an open wound waiting for acknowledgement. She signed anyway. The ink bled slightly, spidering into the fibers of the paper. An irreversible act, she sat back. The hum of the lights filled the air, endless, mechanical, unbothered. At 4:17 p.m. she sent the report. A soft ping signaled its arrival in the department server. Within minutes it would circulate through the chain of command, passed, annotated, diminished. Somewhere in the process, her sentences would be rewritten. Fear would become non-compliance. Disproportionate would become necessary. The word silence might disappear. Altogether, the machinery of language, doing what it always did, absorbing rebellion, and spitting out procedure. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The hum of the printer still lingered, even after it had stopped. It sounded like breathing, like guilt pretending to be order. In the stillness, she imagined the report printed again and again, until the entire building filled with copies, pages fluttering under the air vents, walls lined with sterile sentences, each one erasing a fraction of truth. In the center of that imagined storm sat the untouched cup of water from the hospital room, still unmoved, still clear. A reminder that dignity needed no language. The door opened, her supervisor's silhouette framed by the light of the hallway. "Finished?" he asked. Yes, he nodded once. "Good. Command wants clean paperwork on this. They'll appreciate your efficiency." The word clean hung in the air. When he left, the door closed with a hiss, an airtight seal against conscience. Mara stood, took the top copy of her report, and slid it into the shredder by the door. The machine whirred, devouring the paper in long curling ribbons. It smelled faintly of heat and finality. She watched until the last strip disappeared. Then she shut the machine off. The rest of the copies, the digital ones as would live on the servers. Immutable, archived, eternal. But this one, the first, the one with her signature, would exist only in memory. She turned off the light. The printer's display glowed faintly in the dark. A small square of blue, waiting for the next report. The next sanitized account of pain. As she stepped into the corridor, her reflection followed her once again in the polished floor. Each step dimmed the light behind her, until there was nothing left but the sound of her breathing and the hum of a system that never slept. Outside, the city flickered, neon, efficient, indifferent. Inside, the last page of the report cooled in the shredder bin, still warm, still legible in fragments. Silence. Cannot be considered. Compliance. A final truth, half destroyed but not gone. And somewhere in the machinery of justice, something small began to falter, not enough to stop it, but enough to make it stutter. It began without warning, a flicker on her inbox, a subject line she didn't recognize, then another, then 50 more. Mara Ellison sat alone in the dim light of her office, the hum of machines around her low and constant, like the breathing of something alive. On her screen, the emails multiplied, notifications blooming like mold across sterile glass. Internal report, confirmation, request, FW, urgent, media inquiry. Did you authorize this, detective? Her cursor hovered above the first message. She didn't open it. She already knew. The report had leaked. Not the revised version, not the sanitized file she'd been told to finalize for public release. The original, the one she'd shredded. Somehow, impossibly, it had survived. Her words, "Silence cannot be considered compliance," now circled the internet, stripped of context, turned into a headline. Screens across the country glowed with her phrasing. Talk shows repeated it. Commentators dissected it. And the department predictably panicked. She checked the time. 2:11 a.m. The office should have been empty, but down the corridor she could hear the faint metallic clatter of a shredding machine. Someone else, somewhere, erasing their paper trail. The sound was rhythmic, frantic. It reminded her of heartbeats under pressure. Her badge clipped to her belt felt heavy, as if pulling her toward the floor. She unhooked it and placed it beside the keyboard. It landed with a soft metallic thud that seemed louder than anything in the room. For a moment she simply watched it, the emblem of belonging, the proof of obedience. Now it looked like evidence. Another email arrived. From Internal Communications. Subject, confidentiality breach. Mandatory response. All personnel. With access to Case 48B, must submit written statements by 0900 hours. No external communication permitted. Violation of protocol will result in administrative suspension. She read it twice. The language was familiar, precise, weaponized. Protocol masquerading as order. Fear masquerading as professionalism. Her office door was closed, but she imagined the building alive with whispers, phones vibrating in drawers, text messages half-typed then deleted, printers paused mid-page. An entire institution turning inward to defend itself. Her name would already be circulating. Detective Ellison, the leak, the liability, the idealist. The word idealist was not a compliment here. She opened the department website. A new press release blinked at the top of the page. The department is aware of an unauthorized disclosure of confidential materials. An internal review is underway. We remain committed to transparency and accountability. She almost laughed. Transparency and accountability, the same words she had heard at every podium, the same words that meant the opposite of themselves. On another tab, her own sentence appeared again, quoted, isolated, stripped of authorship. Silence cannot be considered compliance. It floated across social feeds, formatted in italics, attributed only to anonymous source, internal affairs. A truth without a name, a confession without protection. The screen's glow painted her face in cold light. The office around her felt smaller now, the air thick with the hum of electricity and paranoia. She looked at the badge again. Once, it had been her shield. Now it was her target. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand. The metal edge pressed into her palm. Every symbol on it, eagle, seal, serial number, was a language of loyalty. And yet loyalty, she thought, had always been the system's weapon of choice. A soft knock at the door. Too gentle to be authority. Who is it? Silence. Then a voice she recognized. Evan Mercer, the department IT liaison. Nervous, young, always apologizing for things he didn't do. Mara, he said quietly, you need to see this. She unlocked the door. He stepped in, clutching a tablet. The hallway light behind him flickered. They've locked the servers, he whispered. They're auditing every access point. Your terminal's already flagged. Her stomach tightened. How long before they call me in? They're already drafting the notice, he said. You've got maybe an hour. She looked past him, down the corridor, empty, sterile, humming. The sound of shredding had stopped. Who leaked it? She asked. He hesitated. They think it was you. She almost smiled. Of course they do. He shook his head. Mara, you don't get it. This isn't just disciplinary. They're calling it a breach of national conduct. That report mentioned federal involvement. You touched a federal case. Her pulse slowed, a controlled stillness, the same stillness Kaden had shown her. Then it's out of their hands, she said. He didn't answer. When he left, she sat again, facing the monitor. Emails kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds. Urgent. Media request. Please confirm authority. Internal notice. Confidential material found in public domain. The words filled the screen like fog. She minimized them one by one until only her desktop remained, empty, except for a single folder labeled Report Final Draft. She opened it. Inside were two files, Report RevaDocX and the official version, Report orig.txt, the one she'd thought destroyed. Her hand froze over the mouse. Modified. Yesterday, 11:32 p.m. Someone had copied it after she'd shredded the paper version. Someone inside the building. The leak hadn't come from outside. It had been born here in the same corridors that had birthed the lie. She closed the laptop, the click loud in the quiet. Then she slipped her badge into the drawer, face down, and shut it. For a moment she stared at her reflection in the black screen, faint, fractured, uncertain. The hum of the overhead light flickered once, then steadied. The air smelled faintly of heat, the kind that comes before a system burns. Outside, sirens echoed distantly, the city unaware that the real emergency was happening under fluorescent light. Somewhere a journalist refreshed a page, another story taking shape, and in the corner of her office the shredder bin still held the curled remains of her original report, paper that had once carried truth, now torn into memory. She reached into it, lifted a single strip. The words were broken but visible, cannot be considered. She turned off the light, leaving the strip on her desk beside the badge. Two artifacts of belief, one destroyed, one losing value. Then she left the office, the hum of machines fading. Behind her, replaced by the sharp metallic echo of a door closing. The system would turn on itself now. She had merely given it the reason, and somewhere between silence and exposure, her own reckoning began. The chamber was built for performance. Rows of mahogany desks curved toward a central table, draped in government blue. Brass nameplates gleamed beneath television lights. The air smelled faintly of varnish and sweat. Behind the dais, the seal of the Republic loomed, wings outstretched, talons empty, a symbol of authority pretending to be balance. Every surface was polished, every silence rehearsed. The hearing was called to order at 9 sharp. Subcommittee on Oversight and Institutional Conduct, the clerk announced, voice echoing across marble and microphones. The words sounded almost holy, as if bureaucracy could sanctify itself through ceremony. Mara Ellison sat at the witness table, a glass of water before her, a small microphone angled toward her throat. She wore the same grey suit she had worn in court once, years ago. Neutral, colourless, forgettable. The badge she no longer carried had been confiscated 2 days earlier. Beside her sat a department representative, counsel, fluent in phrases that meant nothing. Across the room, cameras adjusted their lenses, ready to translate morality into viewership. At the back of the hall, Althea Moore sat in the gallery, silent. Her posture alone commanded the room, upright, unmoving, her hands clasped over her bag. She had refused interviews, statements, tears. Her presence was the only truth that could not be redacted. The chairman cleared his throat. "Detective Ellison," he began, "thank you for appearing voluntarily. We appreciate your cooperation in this matter, voluntarily." The word was almost cruel in its pretense. She nodded once. "Yes, sir." He leaned toward his microphone. "For the record, could you confirm that you authored the report now publicly circulating under your name?" "I did," she said. "Did you authorize its release?" "No." He paused. A small, deliberate silence calibrated for effect. "In your report you wrote, quote, 'The system functions to protect itself.' Would you care to elaborate on that statement?" Mara looked up, eyes steady on him. "The line speaks for itself," he smiled faintly. "Detective, this committee would prefer if you used precise language." "I did." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The counsel beside her shifted in discomfort. He slid a note toward her, "Stay composed. Limit commentary." She didn't read the rest. Another member spoke, her voice sharp, performative. "Detective, are you suggesting there is deliberate bias in law enforcement operations at the federal level?" "I'm not suggesting it," Mara said. "I'm describing it," the woman frowned. "That's a serious accusation. So is a body on the asphalt." The microphones caught it perfectly. The chamber exhaled in collective tension. From the corner of her vision, Mara saw the journalists scribbling, phones raised, live stream icons glowing red. Truth, captured and commodified. The chairman tapped his pen once, the signal to reset the tone. "Detective Ellison," he said, "you understand that this hearing is about maintaining institutional trust, not undermining it." Mara studied him. He was an expert in controlled empathy, the kind that looked good on camera. "I understand," she said. Then quietly, "That's the problem." A staffer poured water into her glass. The sound, steady, measured, almost reverent, filled the gap between questions. Each drop landed like punctuation in the theater of order. "Did you knowingly include subjective interpretation in your report?" Another member asked. Mara turned the glass slowly in her hand, watching the light fracture through it. "I included what was visible," she said. "If truth appears subjective, it's because the institution has forgotten what objectivity looks like." The counsel exhaled loudly this time. "Madam Chair, my client—" "Detective," the chairman interrupted, "are you aware of the public consequences of your statements? The protests, the media coverage, the erosion of trust?" "Yes," she said. "I'm aware. And do you feel responsible for that?" "No," she said. Then, "I feel responsible for telling the truth." For a moment, silence filled the room. Not the bureaucratic kind, not the practiced pauses between phrases, but something heavier. The microphones picked up only the faint hum of air conditioning and the slow creak of chairs. Althea's hands remained still in her lap. Her eyes, when Mara glanced back, were steady, the same quiet defiance Kaden had carried in the holding room. The chairman straightened his papers. "This hearing is not a trial," he said. "We are here to ensure proper procedure was followed." Mara almost smiled. "Procedure was followed," she said. "That's why we're here." The sentence hung there, perfect, inescapable. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Behind the dais, the stenographer kept typing, her fingers tapping like rainfall. Every word immortalized in official record. Every truth surrounded by formality. The chairman finally said, "Detective Ellison, do you have anything else you wish to add for the record?" She hesitated, then leaned toward the microphone. "I want it stated," she said slowly, "that systems do not collapse from lies. They collapse from the moments when someone tells the truth and the structure refuses to hold it." The words echoed, amplified, recorded, unstoppable. The chairman shifted, clearly unprepared for poetry in a hearing. He nodded to the clerk. "Let the record reflect the witness's statement." The gavel struck once, and loud, ceremonial, hollow. "Thank you, Detective Ellison. This session will recess." The sound reverberated through the chamber, the official punctuation mark of moral discomfort. Mara stood. Her chair legs scraped against marble, the same sound that had haunted the hospital floor. She gathered her papers. Though none of them mattered, as she turned to leave, she caught Althea's gaze again. No smile, no nod. Only shared recognition. Two women standing in the architecture of silence, both unwilling to kneel before it. The cameras followed Mara as she walked out of the chamber. Outside, the hallway lights were blinding, the world already moving on to the next headline. Reporters shouted her name. She didn't stop. The doors closed behind her, muffling the chaos, leaving only the echo of her footsteps and the faint metallic click of the microphone being switched off. Somewhere inside, the stenographer saved the document. A file name appeared on her screen. Hearing transcript final doxa. Another record entered the archive. Another truth captured, neutralized, preserved, and still, behind the thick glass of the chamber, the water pitchers gleamed under the lights, untouched, perfectly full. Symbols of clarity that no one ever drank from. The ceremony had ended. The performance had succeeded. But the silence, that deliberate public silence, was beginning to sound like consequence.